Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're traveling to Washington, D.C. to explore one of the most visited and inspiring museums in the world, the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. This is the place where the dream of flying and the adventure of space exploration are brought to life through real aircraft, rockets, and spacecraft. So let's begin our journey into the sky and beyond. The story of the National Air and Space Museum did not begin with a building, but with a growing fascination for flight in America. As early as the 1860s, the Smithsonian Institution showed interest in aviation. In 1861, scientist Joseph Henry, the first secretary of the Smithsonian, allowed balloonist Thaddeus S.C. Lowe to demonstrate a hydrogen balloon on Smithsonian grounds. This moment marked one of the first connections between the Smithsonian and human flight. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Smithsonian began collecting early flight-related objects. These included kites from China, early engines such as the Stringfellow steam engine in 1889, and experimental gliders. After the Wright brothers successfully flew the first powered airplane in 1903, aviation began to transform the world rapidly. The Smithsonian realized that these inventions were not just machines, but part of a new chapter in human history worth preserving. As aviation technology grew through World War I, the 1920s, and World War II, the number of artifacts related to flight also increased dramatically. Airplanes, engines, instruments, and uniforms were being collected and stored in different buildings. But there was still no proper museum dedicated to aviation. This changed in 1946, when the United States Congress officially created the National Air Museum. President Harry S. Truman signed the act into law. The main goal of this new museum was to collect, preserve, and display significant aircraft and aviation-related objects that represented America's growth in air, power, and technology. However, even after it was established, the National Air Museum did not have its own building. Many objects were displayed in older Smithsonian buildings like the Arts and Industries Building, while others sat in storage or even outdoors, along the National Mall in an area people called Rocket Row. It was clear that a dedicated space was needed. But funding and planning took time. When the space race began in the late 1950s, after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, the focus of the museum expanded. Space travel was no longer science fiction, it was real. In 1958, NASA was created, and the United States entered the race to the moon. The Smithsonian began collecting rockets, satellites, and space equipment alongside aircraft. Because of this, in 1966, Congress officially changed the name from the National Air Museum to the National Air and Space Museum to include both aviation and space exploration. Planning for a permanent museum building began in the 1960s. The site chosen was on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., between 4th and 7th Streets, close to the Capitol and the Washington Monument. Architect Gio Obata designed a modern building with large, open halls and high ceilings so planes and spacecraft could be displayed as if floating in the air. Construction started in the early 1970s. Finally, on July 1, 1976, during the celebration of the United States bicentennial, the National Air and Space Museum officially opened to the public. It was more than a building, it was a symbol of human achievement in flight and space exploration. From its earliest balloon experiments to spacecraft that traveled to the moon, the museum was built to inspire people of all ages and to protect the history of aviation and space for future generations. The National Air and Space Museum is located in one of the most important and symbolic areas of the United States, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This stretch of land is home to some of the most famous buildings and monuments in the country, such as the U.S. Capitol, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and several Smithsonian museums. The museum stands on the south side of the mall, between 4th Street and 7th Street, making it easy for millions of visitors to find and explore. The location was chosen carefully. Placing the museum on the National Mall meant giving aviation and space exploration the same national importance as American history, art, and government. It showed that the achievements of pilots, engineers, and astronauts are part of the story of the United States. From the outside, visitors can see the clean, modern design of the building, powerful and open. The museum was designed by architect Gio Obata, from the firm Helmuth Obata, Tamba Casabohm Hawk. He faced a unique challenge. Not only did the building have to be beautiful, but it also had to display extremely large objects like full-sized airplanes, rockets, and spacecraft. To solve this, he created a structure made of 4 large pavilions connected by wide glass and steel galleries. These galleries were built with very high ceilings and strong beams so that planes could be hung from the roof, as if they were flying above visitors. The main materials used in the building are Tennessee pink, marble, glass, and steel. The marble matches the style of other important buildings on the mall, while the large glass walls let natural light enter and allow people outside to see parts of the exhibits inside. When you stand outside the museum, you can often see aircraft like the Spirit of St. Louis or space modules hanging inside through the glass facade. Inside, The architecture is open and spacious. The most iconic area is the Boeing Milestones of Flight Hall, located right at the entrance. This room has a vast ceiling and open floor space, allowing the museum to display some of the most legendary vehicles in history. Airplanes, satellites, rockets, and capsules are suspended above visitors, creating the feeling of walking through time and technology. The interior layout was designed to make movement easy. Wide corridors lead to different galleries, each focused on a specific theme: early flight, World War II aircraft, space exploration, the moon landing, and much more. The building also includes theaters, classrooms, a planetarium, archives, and research spaces for scientists and historians. Even the smallest architectural choices served a purpose. The floors are strong enough to hold the weight of massive aircraft. The climate control systems protect delicate objects like spacesuits and early wooden airplanes. Every detail was designed not only to display these machines, but to preserve them for future generations. When the museum opened in 1976, its architecture was praised for being modern and functional, yet respectful to the historic surroundings of the mall. Today, it remains one of the most recognizable and visited museum buildings in the world. More than just a structure, it serves as a gateway to human achievement, standing proudly in the nation's capital as a tribute to innovation, discovery, and the spirit of exploration. As visitors step into the museum, they are transported back to the dawn of aviation, an era when flying was only a dream and brave inventors were still trying to understand how to lift a machine into the sky. This section of the museum honors the pioneers of flight, the visionaries who believed that humans could fly when most people thought it was impossible. The centerpiece of this section is the original 1903 Wright Flyer, created by Orville and Wilbur Wright. This is the actual airplane that made the first powered, controlled, and sustained flight on December 17, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The aircraft looks simple: wooden frames, cloth-covered wings, and a small engine, but it represents one of the greatest achievements in human history. The Wright brothers designed their own engine, built propellers by hand, and used a system of wing warping to control the plane in the air. On that cold morning in Kitty Hawk, their first flight lasted only 12 seconds and covered 120 feet. But it proved that powered flight was possible. Nearby, visitors can also see artifacts from earlier attempts at flight gliders, balloons, and flying machines from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These early efforts show how inventors around the world were trying different ideas long before the Wright brothers succeeded. Some experimented with hot air balloons, while others built gliders that used wind and gravity to stay in the air. Another iconic aircraft on display is the Spirit of St. Louis, the plane flown by Charles Lindbergh in 1927. This single-engine airplane completed the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. Traveling from New York to Paris, the journey took 33.5 hours and made Lindbergh an international hero. The Spirit of St. Louis is suspended from the museum's ceiling, just as it was when Lindbergh landed in Paris to cheering crowds. The aircraft is simple: no front windshield, limited instruments, and built for speed and fuel efficiency, but it represents a time when pilots took incredible risks for progress. This section also highlights early commercial aviation and the birth of air travel for the public. Visitors can see planes from the 1920s and 1830s used by airlines such as Pan American Airways and United Airlines. These aircraft helped turn flying from an adventure for a few brave pilots into a new way of travel for passengers around the world. Inside the museum, people can see how airplane interiors looked during this time: small seats, open cockpits, and limited safety features. What makes this part of the museum so special is that it shows how human flight started, not with advanced technology, but with curiosity, persistence, and courage. The Wright Flyer and the Spirit of St. Louis are not just machines; they are symbols of determination, invention, and the belief that humans could conquer the skies. This section ends with the understanding that once humanity learned to fly, the world changed forever. Distances became shorter, nations became more connected, and the sky was no longer the limit. The foundations laid by these early pioneers made everything that came: next jet engines, space rockets, and even moon landings. When Louis XIV, the Sun King, ascended to the throne, everything changed. He envisioned Versailles not just as a retreat but as a magnificent symbol of absolute power. In 1661, he ordered the transformation of the modest hunting lodge into a grand palace that would awe the world. Thousands of architects, painters, sculptors, and laborers were summoned. Marshlands were drained, forests were cleared, and marble, gold, and crystal were brought from across Europe. Versailles became a massive construction site filled with noise, dust, and ambition. But for Louis XIV, this wasn't just about luxury, it was about control. By bringing the nobility to live at Versailles, he ensured they were always under his watchful eye, distracted by ceremonies, dances, and court etiquette. The palace grew rapidly. Ornate halls, elegant apartments, and stunning gardens began to take shape. Every ceiling, every fountain, every statue carried a message: all power comes from the king. Among all the wonders of Versailles, None is more breathtaking than the Hall of Mirrors. Completed in 1684, this iconic gallery stretches over 73 meters, 240 feet. 17 grand arched windows overlook the palace gardens, and directly across from each window is a mirror, creating a dazzling illusion of endless space, light, and grandeur. At a time when mirrors were rare and extremely expensive, this hall was a declaration of wealth and power. The ceiling, painted by Charles Lebrun, celebrates the military victories and achievements of Louis XIV, the Sun King. Crystal chandeliers hang overhead, reflecting sunlight by day and candlelight by night. Imagine the glow of 20,000 candles during royal balls and ceremonies, music playing, gowns shimmering, and courtiers bowing as the king entered. This is where history was made. On June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed here, officially ending World War I. A room built for glory forever, marked by diplomacy, power, and peace. The early 20th century was a time of daring innovation and fearless pioneers. The National Air and Space Museum brings this thrilling era to life with aircraft, stories, and inventions that changed the world. After the Wright brothers' first flight in 1903, aviation technology developed rapidly. By the 1920s and 1930s, known as the golden age of flight, airplanes became faster, stronger, and capable of carrying passengers across great distances. Inside the museum, this era is celebrated in vivid detail. Charles Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis. The actual plane hangs from the ceiling. This is the same aircraft Lindbergh flew in 1927, during the world's first solo, non-stop flight across the Atlantic Ocean, from New York to Paris. Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Vega 5B. This bright red airplane tells the story of the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in 1932. Her courage inspired generations of aviators, especially women. Air races and innovation. The museum showcases sleek racing planes from the Schneider Trophy and Thompson Trophy races, where designers pushed speed and engineering to new levels. Birth of passenger airlines displays show how aviation evolved from adventure to industry. Early passenger cabins, uniforms for flight attendants, and the beginnings of airlines like Pan Am and TUI. This section of the museum reminds visitors that the dream of flight was not just about machines, it was about human courage, ambition, and the will to reach beyond the horizon. World War II marked one of the most intense periods of innovation in aviation history. The National Air and Space Museum preserves this chapter with real aircraft, stories of bravery, and the technologies that changed warfare forever. During the war, airplanes became faster, deadlier, and more advanced than ever before. The museum displays iconic planes from all sides of the conflict. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress Enola Gay. This aircraft dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima in 1945. It represents both a decisive moment in history and a powerful reminder of the destructive force of war. Supermarine Spitfire and Messerschmitt Bf 109. These two legendary fighter planes used by Britain and Germany faced each other in the Battle of Britain. Their sleek designs and fierce dogfights are remembered as symbols of resilience and strategy. North American P-51 Mustang, known as the Cadillac of the skies. This American long-range fighter escorted bombers deep into enemy territory, protecting crews on dangerous missions. Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, lightweight and agile. The Zero dominated early Pacific battles, showing how engineering precision could change the course of the war. Beyond machines, the museum also honors the people behind the planes, brave pilots and aircrews who risked their lives in missions, genius engineers and mechanics who designed and fixed aircraft under pressure. The role of women and minorities, including the Women Air Force Service pilots, WASP, and the Tuskegee Airmen, who broke barriers and proved their skill and courage. Visitors don't just see aircraft, they step into the stories of tension, sacrifice, and innovation that shaped the modern world. After World War II, a new competition began, not on Earth, but in the skies and beyond. This was the space race, a dramatic rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union to conquer space. The National Air and Space Museum tells this story with real spacecraft, powerful stories, and world-changing milestones. It all began with a beep. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. That tiny metal sphere shocked the world and marked the beginning of the space age. The United States responded by founding NASA in 1958, beginning a bold mission to explore space. The museum showcases all major moments of this cosmic competition. Sputnik 1 and Explorer 1 models representing the first satellites from the USSR and the USA, both small in size, yet massive in historical impact. Vostok 1 Yuri Gagarin's spacecraft in 1961. Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, orbiting Earth in this tiny capsule. The museum features a full-scale replica of this historic craft. Mercury and Gemini capsules. America-trained astronauts tested spacewalking and re-entry, all preparing for one goal, landing on the moon. Apollo 11 Command Module, Columbia. This is the exact spacecraft that carried Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins to the Moon in 1969. Visitors can see the scorch marks from its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Moon rock displays real lunar samples collected by Apollo astronauts that visitors can send in some exhibits. Even touch. The space race was more than a political rivalry. It was a story of human ambition, courage, and the desire to go beyond what anyone thought possible. On July 20, 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the Moon and said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," it wasn't just America's victory, it was a triumph for all humanity. After the Moon, humanity's gaze turned even farther to the planets, moons, and mysteries of our vast solar system. The National Air and Space Museum captures this journey into the unknown through spacecraft, probes, and exhibits that tell the story of exploration beyond Earth. This section immerses visitors in the golden age of robotic space, exploration missions that expanded our understanding of the cosmos without a single human aboard. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 launched in 1977. These twin spacecraft explored the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, sending back breathtaking images of swirling storms and icy rings. Today, they are still traveling through interstellar space, carrying the famous golden record, a message from Earth to any life that might find them. Mariner and Viking missions. The museum highlights the early Mars explorers. Viking 1 and 2, launched in 1975, became the first spacecraft to successfully land on Mars and transmit images from its dusty surface, showing us another world up close for the first time. Pioneer 10 and 11. These probes were the first to pass through the asteroid belt and give us humanity's first glimpses of Jupiter and Saturn. Hubble Space Telescope. Exhibit a full-scale model of Hubble, along with real tools used by astronauts to service it. Reveals how this orbiting observatory changed astronomy forever, uncovering galaxies, nebulae, and the birthplaces of stars. Planetary models and interactive displays. Visitors can see accurate models of spacecraft, touch meteorites older than Earth, and learn how scientists are planning future missions to asteroids, moons, and even Mars. This section reminds us that space exploration is not just about science, it's about imagination. Each probe, telescope, and mission represents humanity's endless desire to seek answers and to understand our place in the universe. Section 9. The Jet Age and Modern FLEGHTS. Technology advanced. The world entered the jet age, a time when travel became faster, safer, and more connected than ever before. The National Air and Space Museum showcases this transformation through aircraft, engines, and stories that highlight the evolution of commercial and military aviation. This era, beginning in the late 1940s, changed how people saw the world. Oceans no longer separated continents. Jet engines made it possible to cross them in hours instead of days. Key highlights in this section. Boeing 77 and the birth of commercial jet travel. The Boeing 707 marked the beginning of widespread international air travel. It brought speed and comfort to the public and helped airlines like Pan Am become global icons. Concorde, the supersonic legend. One of the museum's most striking aircraft is the sleek Concorde, capable of flying faster than the speed of sound, Mach 2. Passengers could fly from New York to London in about 3.5 hours. It symbolized luxury, innovation, and the future of travel. Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, a black, needle-shaped aircraft designed for espionage during the Cold War. The SR-71 still holds the record as the fastest air-breathing manned aircraft ever built, flying at speeds over 3,500 kilometers per hour, 2,200 miles per hour. Boeing 747, the Queen of the Skies. This massive jet revolutionized air travel by carrying more passengers than ever. It made long-distance travel affordable and connected the world like never before. Modern aviation and technology. The museum also explores today's aviation advancements. Fly-by-wire technology, composite materials, and lightweight aircraft designs. Eco-friendly electric and hybrid planes. Advanced air traffic control systems. National Air and Space Museum is more than a place filled with airplanes and rockets. It's a gateway to dreams, innovation, and the future. Millions of visitors come every year, not just to look back at history, but to imagine what comes next. A living legacy. This museum preserves humanity's greatest achievements in aviation and space exploration, from the Wright brothers' first flight to the moon landing, from wooden gliders to jets that break the sound barrier, from Earth's skies to the edges of the solar system and beyond. Every aircraft, rocket, and space capsule tells a story of courage, imagination, and sacrifice. Education and inspiration. The Smithsonian uses the museum to educate and inspire future generations. Interactive exhibits teach visitors how planes fly, how rockets work, and how astronauts survive in space. Programs like STEM workshops, astronomy nights, and flight simulators help young students fall in love with science and engineering. The Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Virginia, an extension of the museum, houses even more aircraft, including the Space Shuttle Discovery, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the Enola Gay. Visitors can observe restoration labs where experts bring historic machines back to life. Looking to the future, the story doesn't end. Here humanity's journey continues. NASA, SpaceX, Blue Origin, and other agencies are preparing for missions to the Moon and Mars. Concepts like supersonic commercial jets, electric aircraft, and space tourism are becoming reality. Satellites are helping us monitor Earth's climate, explore distant planets, and even search for signs of life beyond our world. By no thought, the National Air and Space Museum stands as a symbol of what humanity can achieve when we dare to dream, when we are curious, and when we refuse to give up. It reminds us that the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning.